Blazor Futures with Daniel Roth.
The Azure DevOps Podcast is a show for developers and DevOps professionals shipping software using Microsoft technologies. Each show brings you hard-hitting interviews with industry experts, innovating better methods, and sharing success stories. Listen on to learn how to increase quality, ship quickly, and operate well. And now your host, Jeffrey Palermo.
Welcome to the show. I'm Jeffrey Palermo, your host for helping you and your teams move fast and deliver quality and to run your software with confidence in Azure, all while using everything that the .NET ecosystem has to offer. The podcast is sponsored by ClearMeasure, a software architecture company empowering .NET teams to be self-sufficient and able to deliver world-class results. They are hiring architects as well as .NET engineers who would like a path to become an architect. So you can go to clearmeasure.com/careers for that. Our guest today on the show is a repeat guest, Daniel Roth. He was last with us on episode 158. You can go in the archives and look at that show. But he's a principal product manager on the ASP.NET team working on ASP.NET Core, Blazor, and other web features. He's previously worked on various parts of .NET, including System.NET, WCF, SAML, and as well as ASP.NET as a whole. And his passions include building frameworks for modern web that are simple and easy to use. Daniel, welcome back to the show. How are you, sir?
Thank you, Jeffrey. It's great to be here again. I'm doing fine.
Oh, my pleasure. My pleasure. Well, you have been really busy, and your team's been really busy, kind of working on Blazor and new capabilities for web stuff on .NET. But there's invariably a good number of listeners who did not hear your previous episodes and all that, and maybe haven't seen you speak. So why don't we start with just what are the high points that have kind of led you to focusing on .NET web applications in your career and kind of landed you where you are today?
Oh, wow. Yeah. I mean, .NET has had great support for building web apps for like forever, like for decades. You could build rich web applications using .NET with like ASP.NET. You know, back in the day it was web forms and then MVC. We have a long legacy of web frameworks that we've built with .NET over the years. But all those frameworks operated in a particular way. They all operated from the server. You send requests to the server, you run some .NET code, it does some fancy stuff to generate HTML or generate some JSON responses, and you get that response back to the browser. But if you wanted to do anything client-side, anything that ran on the user's machine within the browser context, well, the only way to do that would be to write some JavaScript, because that's all that browsers knew how to execute. So if you were a .NET web developer, you were always straddling these two ecosystems, the JavaScript world and the .NET server development world. And that all changed when browsers modernized and shipped some new open web features that really created new possibilities. WebSockets, WebAssembly. These are all capabilities of modern browsers that now enable us to create rich interactive web UI experiences in the browser using non-JavaScript technologies, using .NET and C#. So that's what Blazor is all about. It's sort of filling that hole, that gaping hole in a .NET developer's heart of, I really want to write rich interactive web UI that normally would require me to write JavaScript, but that's not really my thing. That's not my skill set. I know C#, I know Visual Studio, I know .NET libraries. Can I use my first language to write that type of app? And the answer with Blazor is like, yes, you can now do that.
You make a good point. The JavaScript frameworks. I'm wondering, did anybody really want to write a whole lot of JavaScript, or is it just, man, okay, there's a framework that can do this stuff, really, use the memory and CPU of the browser. Oh, but you have to use JavaScript. Okay, and then enough libraries, like, okay, now this is palatable because we have enough libraries and enough things. But now that there's a C# way to do it, I mean, just from personal experience, I'd much rather write the logic in C# than JavaScript.
It's so nice. Like I still remember the first time I sat down in front of Blazor, and this was in the early days. It was a prototype that Steve Sanderson had put together. It was actually for like a conference demo. He was playing around with the new WebAssembly features and browsers, and he built this little web UI framework called Blazor using a small .NET runtime implemented in WebAssembly. And you could build like little web UI components and build a simple web app using this prototype. And I remember sitting down in front of it and feeling like, oh, I can finally write client UI. I'm not a great, I can write some JavaScript. Like I know, I'm sure many people are in the similar boat as me, but I'm not an expert JavaScript developer. This was very enabling. I mean, I don't want to knock JavaScript too much. Like the JavaScript has come a long way. There's some amazing stuff that you can do in JavaScript. The JavaScript language that I knew 10 years ago is very different now. A lot of the problems that I was just thought were terrible with JavaScript 10 years ago, a lot of those have been fixed. And there's a lot of great innovation that happens in the JavaScript world. But there's more than one developer ecosystem. Like, why should it only be JavaScript when you want to write web apps? And that's really what these new modern web standards enable. You can now, if you're a .NET dev, you can write full stack web apps. If you're a Python dev, you can write full stack web apps. If you're a Go dev, you can do the same. It opens up those developer ecosystems to you in a way that wasn't possible before.
Well, I want to start with kind of vision and understand what you and your teammates talk about as the future of Blazor. Because when I look at what's been released, and there's tons of videos from the build conference and other things where, okay, I can do a web spa that competes with JavaScript frameworks like Angular and React. Oh, but wait a minute. Just a few weeks ago, I made a WPF system tray application, which was maybe a couple lines of WPF, and then the rest of it was Blazor. And
Nice.
now Maui, it's like, okay, I got a shell of an iPhone application, but it's really Blazor. And so it's, I mean, besides just, hey, this is possible, let's do it. Fast forward a number of years, it's like, what's the thought process in this, and where? Because I see a morphing happening.
Yeah, we call that pattern Blazor Hybrid. This pattern of taking Blazor, their web UI components, they're still rendering HTML, dealing with CSS for styling, but being able to reuse them within native client apps, like rendering a Blazor component from a .NET Maui application, and that can run on desktop, Windows, Mac. It can run on mobile devices, iOS, Android. You can take those same Blazor components and embed them in a WPF app, in a WinForms application. The way this works is the Blazor components run locally in the client app. They're not like running remotely. We're not embedding them into a web view using WebAssembly. They're running normal .NET code in a normal .NET client app, but they render to a web view the HTML through a local interop channel. So you get this hybrid of benefits of the web world. You're using the web platform as your common UI layer, but you also get full native capabilities. Your .NET code runs fast on a native .NET runtime. It can JIT and do all those things. You can access native platform features through normal .NET APIs. That's what we have been just kind of wrapped up actually at this point with the .NET Maui release that happened back in May. Blazor Hybrid shipped with .NET Maui. It's part of the .NET Maui framework. And alongside that, we have also the WinForms and WPF support for Blazor Hybrid as well, if you want to like modernize an existing Windows desktop application. That really, took Blazor from being something that was meant to solve web app scenarios to making it a broad UI solution for pretty much any type of UI that you want to write, whether you're writing native client apps or web applications. You can even share the components across those two. Like if you have a web app and you want to just reuse that UI within a native client app, you can have a common set of Blazor components that are used across both. So that's now available. It's shipped and stable as a framework. The tooling for .NET Maui is just about done. That's coming in the next version of Visual Studio 17.3, which I think is Going to ship a stable release here, not too far in the future. So that's exciting. That the tooling support will be there as well. As we look forward, like the next area of focus for us is, of course, .NET 7. .NET 7 is the next major .NET release that will ship in November.
It's 5 months away.
It's coming out, and we're about to, I think we got one more preview release, and then we'll start cranking out release candidates here pretty quick, starting in the fall. We have a lot of stuff coming in .NET 7 for Blazor as well. There's a bunch of investments in the WebAssembly space, particularly like the WebAssembly runtime. We shipped with .NET 6 some initial set of capabilities there around ahead of time compilation, where you can, instead of running your .NET code on a .NET IL interpreter, which is how Blazor really got its first foot in the door. We built a little .NET IL interpreter in WebAssembly, and you just ship that with your app. What ahead of time compilation does is it says, well, we'll just take actually all your .NET code, and we'll just turn all of that into WebAssembly, and you're just shipping WebAssembly down to the browser. That has a number of benefits in terms of runtime performance. Obviously an IL interpreter is not going to be the fastest thing on the planet. Normal .NET runtimes will JIT the code to native instructions and get a significant perf boost that way. Unfortunately, with WebAssembly, that's not really a pattern that's possible today inside of browsers, like shipping a normal .NET JIT. But ahead of time compilation basically takes that work of the JIT and moves it to a build time step, so you can get all those perf benefits up front. In .NET 7, we're really going to take that work to the next level. There's a bunch of performance work that's been done on the ahead of time compiled code that makes it significantly faster than even what we had in .NET 6. It was already pretty fast in .NET 6. .NET 7 will be significantly faster. We're also working to make it so that you can pick how much of the app you ahead of time compile. Like if you just want to pick one binary and say that one I'm going to ahead of time compile because it's a performance critical path, the rest of the app let's leave as .NET assemblies. The reason why you might want to do that is that ahead of time compiling .NET code generally makes it larger. Like the set of low-level WebAssembly instructions that you need to represent the equivalent .NET IL is more instructions, so it gets bigger. With .NET 7, you'll now be able to turn some knobs and say, well, I'll get the perf benefit where I need it, but keep the app smaller than if I had to like ahead of time compile the whole thing. So that's a big area. Is just better ahead of time compilation in .NET 7. We're also using some of the new WebAssembly standardized features to make that even better, like SIMD support, the exception handling support. Those are all things that just make .NET run better in the browser when running in that mode. Multi-threading is another big one. The .NET runtime that we ship with .NET 6 doesn't have the ability to like start up .NET threads, and that's because, well, you're effectively running under the covers on the JavaScript runtime, the WebAssembly part of the JavaScript runtime, which is single threaded. But there are some browser features that allow us to now implement multi-threading on top of that runtime. Shared array buffers was a key part of that. We were actually really excited to get multi-threading out like in several releases back. We were going to do it because shared array buffers have been around actually for a little while. Unfortunately, there were some nasty security issues that were surfaced in browsers. I'm trying to remember their names, like the side channel based attacks that cause all the browsers basically to turn off shared array buffers. And so we were sitting around waiting for those to get fixed up. Apple was the holdout for a while, and I think it was last December Safari finally got their shared array buffer supported, so that we could support true multi-threading in browsers. So that will come in .NET 7. It'll be in preview support initially. Like it won't actually be fully stable by the time .NET 7 ships, but you'll be able to at least start using multi-threading features with the new .NET 7 WebAssembly capabilities. So a bunch of new WebAssembly work is going to happen. We continue to push on that front, try and make the WebAssembly experience with .NET as true to a native .NET experience as we possibly can. As I look forward, like there's still we called this Blazor Native Experiment when we're looking at the spectrum of things that could be possible with the Blazor programming model. The idea behind Blazor Native was, well, what if you like the Blazor component model, you like the Razor syntax, but you actually want to render native UI instead of web UI. Like you don't want to deal with the HTML DOM. You want to like render an actual Android button or a WinUI 3 button on Windows. That's an experiment that we still have available through a project called the Mobile Blazor Bindings Project, which was actually some of the precursor for the Blazor Hybrid work that we did with the .NET MAUI release. So the hybrid part of Mobile Blazor Bindings, that's now part of the product. We've shipped that, supported. You can do web UI and native clients. The native part, we're still a little unsure about. We're not sure we're going to carry that forward yet. It'll still be there in Mobile Blazor Bindings. So, we're interested in people's feedback. In MAUI in general, we're doing a lot of thinking about like what is the right way to write native UI. Like today in MAUI, you write native UI using XAML. That's the programming model.
Yeah.
We're not sure XAML's great. If you're a XAML dev, you already know XAML. That's fine. But we're not sure it's the like right paradigm for future growth. Like if you're a new dev getting into native client development, is learning XAML what you want to do? We're looking at what other developer frameworks do, like Swift and Flutter, and they tend to have like a more fluent style, direct in the language. Like You're writing Dart or you're writing Swift for defining the user interface. There's a lot of benefits to that. That means like if you know C#, you can define. If you could define your whole UI in C#, that means you're not having to again learn another language to define your user interface. So there's some thoughts that maybe that's the direction we might go. Comet was an experiment that we put out that's kind of in that vein. It was done by James Clancy. Using Razor as the syntax for defining UI. I mean, Razor was built specifically around HTML. Like you have HTML markup and you want C# code to define how you dynamically render that. Yeah. Is that make sense once you start talking about, native components? My actual gut right now is that maybe that's trying to fit too much into the Razor model. Like Razor's really for markup with code. And I think it's an interesting question. Do we need the markup at all? How much value is there in keeping the markup paradigm when we're no longer talking about DOM? We're no longer talking about, XAML content. We're still noodling on that. So I would say with Blazor Native, we're not sure yet. I think there'll be a number of experiments that we still pursue.
Well, what I hear a lot of developers say whenever they're excited about Blazor and all the different types of applications they can build is now I can use a lot of the same code, but definitely the same skill, and therefore the same developer can write applications for so many different uses. And so to the extent that you make something new, well, now, does it decrease the chances that now a different developer has to do that, or a developer has to gain another additional skill in order to write that type of application?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I mean, this is one of the things we think about a lot with Blazors is that skill reuse and the productivity that you get from that. The idea that you as a web developer, like if you're coming from an ASP.NET Core background, maybe familiar with Blazor already, Blazor Hybrid gives you this path into native client development that might otherwise be a much more high friction path. Like, I have to learn XAML now. I have to learn the MAUI platform. Well, for the UI layer, if you want to just reuse your HTML and CSS and Blazor component skills, Razor skills, you can do that. When you throw native UI into the mix, the amount of skill reuse starts to get thinner and thinner. Like, okay, I know Razor syntax. Maybe I know the Blazor component model.
And CSS.
But the tags are, and CSS, yeah, sure. Yeah. Well, actually, with native UI, applying CSS to native UI elements. I mean, actually, interesting enough, Xamarin and MAUI have a feature for doing that. I'm not sure how really successful it is because the CSS model, the CSS syntax, but
it's translated, right?
It's different for native components. Like maybe you know it really well for HTML and DOM, but not so. Maybe it doesn't translate as well when you're starting to deal with native elements. Yeah, it just gets thinner to the point where we're wondering, maybe that's not even the right approach to keep pushing on. But we're open to people's feedback on this. If you really like the Blazor native model that's in the Mobile Blazor Bindings, let us know. Or if you think that we should go a different way, maybe just have a pure C# story. Or if you're a big XAML fan, like these are all things we'd love to hear about from you.
Many thanks to our podcast sponsor, ClearMeasure. ClearMeasure is a software architecture company that empowers clients' development teams to be self-sufficient, moving fast, delivering quality, and running their systems with confidence. Whether starting a new project or developing new technologies or techniques, ClearMeasure sets up your team to deliver world-class results. Learn more at www.clearmeasure.com. ClearMeasure, empowering software delivery.
Yeah, you're going to have different camps. Like one of the big things that in my opinion, made WinForms popular was that all the applications looked the same. The Battleship Gray WinForms application with everything was the same. And then some people said, man, it's so hard to make it look different and make it the way I want to. So you got two of them. A lot of people like, I didn't even have to mess with it. And it just looked a certain way and I didn't have to worry about it. And other people, I got to customize it. And it's so hard to customize.
Interesting. I don't know if I've ever heard someone advocate for WinForms because of its default UI look and feel, like the classic Battleship Gray. Is that your aesthetic?
No,
you like?
No, this is. I mean, we're dating. This is back in the early 2000s before WPF came out, and there were people who, they all look the same. Oh, it's ugly, but it was so productive. And there were, yes. The fact that we have so many Battleship Gray applications out there, I think is a testament to how many developers didn't care and were just happy to make an application that worked and satisfied the need.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I like when I think about looking forward for Blazor and .NET 8, like the productivity that you got from frameworks like Windows Forms, Web Forms to a large extent, like some of the things I think those frameworks did really well was helping you connect to data and get data into your applications, like giving you components and paradigms that made that fairly simple. I know from an architectural perspective, maybe we cringe a little bit at some of the patterns that they use for doing that, but it's hard to complain about the how quickly you could connect to a database, get some data into your app, into some sort of grid, and like how many apps were built that way, like so many.
Yeah.
With Blazor, I think I'm thinking a lot about that as well. In .NET 7, we actually put out an experimental grid component for Blazor. It's called Quick Grid. This is a component built by the Blazor team. It's put out as sort of a reference implementation for what's possible with Blazor in a grid. Like one of the things we've seen as we look at people's feedback and experience with Blazor is, I would argue it's some FUD on Blazor's performance characteristics, but can it really handle a big grid with tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of rows? And the answer is yeah, it can. If you write a naive component implementation of Blazor, of course you can make it slow.
Yeah, but not if you pass an array.
Yeah, but there are absolutely ways to make it fast, and that's what Quick Grid is all about, is to show that that's possible.
Yeah,
but I do think there's probably an interesting direction to keep pushing that way. Quick Grid connecting to a database, scaffolding out that code based off of your entity framework data models. These are patterns and tooling that .NET has always had and offered. We're kind of lacking some of those things right now with Blazor. We've been a bit more minimalistic in what we have chosen to offer. That was very deliberate, by the way. We were trying to not be opinionated, give you the base framework capabilities, and then let the ecosystem innovate on top of that. But starting to get into these more connected data, rapid application development experiences, I think is an area that Blazor would probably excel at, and an area we'll explore in the .NET 8 timeframe.
It's not so much to the future, but let me ask you about testing. Your teams do tons of testing just on the framework itself and whatnot, and there's been some talk of a new Playwright framework, and then Selenium's been around for a long time, and BUnit. But okay, we're in is it the third or fourth Blazor version now that's been GA'd? I lost count, but is there a now standard and your favorite way that people should be testing the UI level of Blazor applications?
That's a great question. I for unit level testing, I would definitely suggest, even recommend looking at BUnit. It's not from the Blazor team. It's from the open source ecosystem. I think Eagle is the name of the gentleman that maintains it. He has a really great framework for doing unit testing of Blazor components and the various patterns that you can use for doing that.
Yeah, Eagle Hansen.
Yeah, Eagle Hansen. Yep, great. Very, very active in the .NET ecosystem, and if you have a chance to support him in his BUnit maintenance activities, that would be great. For end-to-end testing, internally on the Blazor team, I believe we are still using a fair amount of Selenium for our end-to-end tests. We have explored using Playwright more. Like Playwright is kind of the new hotness in that space, and I know there is a desire to use it more. We just have at the time when we were starting with Blazor, it wasn't really available. It wasn't a thing that we could use, so we ended up with a bunch of Selenium code. I wouldn't say that it's like Selenium is our favorite thing. I wouldn't recommend Selenium happily to someone and be like, oh, you're going to love this. Like it's fairly, I think people who have used Selenium, I think, are familiar that it's has its difficulties in trying to use well.
Yeah, we're looking for something better.
Yeah,
but
Playwright, I would think is a very promising direction. I know on our team, that's something that we've been exploring, is how can we use Playwright more. Even for like non-web scenarios, like we've had conversations with the Playwright team, like, man, could we have like a Playwright experience for like doing Maui app testing and those types of things?
Yeah,
I don't know that there's anything specific that they've done for that yet, but that's something we've at least talked to them about.
Yeah, testing frameworks have always gotten a back seat. Like way back in the WinForms days, there was a framework called White that could find a handle to a button and press it in text boxes and all that. But then, it doesn't get maintained and it kind of falls by the wayside.
Yeah. But testing is important. It should get more attention.
It is. All right. So you mentioned .NET 7 and WebAssembly and all the new browsers. What should people be expecting to be able to, start using in earnest, say at the end of the year?
So with .NET 7, particularly after the next preview release, I would say the .NET 7 Preview 7 release is where the majority of the Blazor capabilities will land for .NET 7 in preview form. You'll be able to do mixed mode AOT. You'll have a much better WebAssembly AOT performance characteristics, like it'll be faster. You'll be able to do multi-threading on top of WebAssembly. A lot of the web crypto APIs are being enabled on top of WebAssembly as well. There's also some experimental support for running .NET code in a browser on WebAssembly without all of the Blazor UI framework in the picture. This is a scenario we start to hear more and more requests about from different users, where I have a .NET library. I don't want to rewrite it in JavaScript. I just want to be able to reuse it from my web application. Is there a way I can do that? You don't really need a Blazor component per se. You're not trying to render HTML. You just want to call into that code and use it. This actually happened, excuse me, even internally at Microsoft. There's a new product called Power Virtual Agents, which is a way to write intelligent chatbots. And they have a web studio that you can use for defining these intelligent chatbots. They had some libraries that were written in .NET for their, Power Effects? Like there's like a expression language that they use in Power Apps that they wanted to make available from this web-based studio, but the code was written in .NET. And so they had either the option of spinning up a 10-person team to go rewrite all this stuff in JavaScript or TypeScript, or they came to us and said, could we use .NET on WebAssembly? And the answer was yes, you could do that. And they were able to save a ton of money and get that functionality working using that capability. It's a bit of a rough experience right now when all you want to do is call into a .NET library. There's ways to do it, and we were able to unblock them. In .NET 7, that experience we're hoping will start to become more first class. We'll start up again a preview of it with the .NET 7 release. There'll be some templates where you can just like basically from JavaScript call into some .NET code, and that's kind of it. Those that will become available in the .NET 7 timeframe as well. Up the stack in like Blazor itself, capabilities that we're adding to Blazor, the custom elements support that we started in .NET 6 that will ship as a stable release with .NET 7. Custom elements is the ability to take a Blazor component and use it as a standards-based custom HTML element from whatever web framework you want. Like maybe you have an existing React app or an Angular app, some JavaScript code, and you're like, man, I really wish I knew about Blazor at the time, but I didn't. And I already have this JavaScript app, but maybe I can use Blazor from within that application. Custom elements make that straightforward. You can just take a Blazor component, use it as a custom element from your React or Angular app, and it just works. So that will ship with .NET 7. It will no longer be in preview.
So what is the registration of that? Because it's a new HTML tag, right?
Yeah.
How does the browser know to interpret that?
There's a set of APIs in modern browsers where you can set up custom elements. Like maybe you've heard of like web components.
Yeah.
That whole model is what this is based on. And other frameworks have this. Like if you're in React, you can take a React component and turn it into a web component, a custom HTML element. Same thing with Angular. This is now that same experience, but with Blazor. So you can retrofit Blazor into any web app experience.
So other web applications, sure, but I'm thinking of all the older applications out there, whether it be WinForms, WPF, or even Microsoft Office application, all the applications written inside Microsoft Outlook that are still out there that do things, and they support a web tag. Does it open up? Do you think there's any barrier to that of just embedding a little HTML tag in an Office application, and boom, it's a little pocket of Blazor in the screen?
Well, I mean, those sound like embedded WebView style scenarios. Is that what you mean, or are you talking about like?
I guess it would be.
If you're embedded WebView, you just need to make sure that WebView is modern enough that it supports the latest web standards, so that it can run web component based code.
WebView 2.
But for Office, I don't know how much they've updated. I mean, WebView 2 is of course a modern web component. So assuming they've upgraded to WebView 2, should be absolutely good to go. Even like the component design frameworks that are used by teams like Office and Teams and Dynamics and so forth, like they all are based on like this Fluent UI design pattern that Microsoft maintains. There's a bunch of Fluent UI components that are provided that are React components. So if you happen to be using React, then great. But there's also a set of Fluent UI components that are provided that are just standards-based web components. They're just custom elements that you can then use from any framework, any application. Mm-hmm. And that's a pattern that then allows like Fluent UI based design to be reused from really any application. As long as you're running on the web, these things will run.
Man, this scenario, I think it opens up so many things. I'm thinking of all the little integrations where the instructions are essentially open up your Wix or WordPress site and go to the editor and paste in this markup. And that's what people do, right? It's like, paste in something in a certain section of your website, and then boom, a whole bunch of new functionalities there.
I mean, you still need the ability to deploy the implementation of that custom element into the environment. So that custom element, if it's a pure custom JavaScript-based web component, you still need to deploy the JavaScript files that are the implementation of that custom element into that. Like if that WordPress site allows that, then that would be fine. But if not, then you'll have that restriction. In the case of Blazor, you'll be deploying the like if it can be either Blazor WebAssembly or Blazor Server. In an environment like that, you're probably talking Blazor WebAssembly, but you would need to at least be able to take the Blazor WebAssembly assets and somehow put them there so that
Gotcha.
that element gets registered, and then the corresponding implementation runs.
Makes sense. Okay, awesome. So there's over time, there's I think the Blazor WebAssembly debugging tooling has gotten more stable. I think early on there was issues there. At this point in time, are we completely on par from all of the tooling, or are there any still kind of gotchas that y'all are tracking?
Tooling is never done. It's always more work to be done. Yeah. Tooling is an area we continue to actively invest in. So the debugging, I assume what you're talking about is specifically like debugging a Blazor WebAssembly app.
Yeah.
Like debugging a normal .NET process, we have fantastic support for, right? The .NET debugger is just an amazing piece of technology. When you're trying to debug .NET code that's running on a WebAssembly runtime, that's running in a browser, things get a little complicated. So to make that work, what we have to do is we have, like, browsers speak their JavaScript debugging protocol. So we put a proxy between your debugging tool, like Visual Studio, and the browser, so that we can basically tunnel .NET isms into the browser so that we can get a .NET debugging experience for that code that's running in that external process. The fidelity of that experience compared to the .NET debugger, it keeps getting better. Like we keep improving things, but there are still, like, I wouldn't say it's like as complete full fidelity .NET debugging experience, but it's gotten way better, and certainly helps with productivity. I would say you get a .NET like debugging experience in the browser. And there have been, that dance is fairly complicated. There's certainly been, stability issues and correctness issues that we've had to work through over the years as we've refined that, but it's come a long way. Another area of tooling that I think is an active area of investment is also the hot reload experience for .NET just in general. This was a new tooling experience that we introduced with .NET 6, where as the app is running, and you're making code changes, you can hot reload, basically apply code changes to the running application and see the effects in real time, enabling that really rich, interactive, particularly UI development experience that if you're coming from a JavaScript world or like the Flutter world, you're probably used to at this point. That's kind of like the standard. We introduced that across all UI workloads in .NET 6. For WebAssembly, and for really any of the .NET workloads that were based on the mono runtime heritage, they have had significantly less capabilities for applying those code changes to the running app. The mono runtime just didn't have as much of that capability. The .NET Core CLR runtime already had a bunch of those capabilities based off of the like edit and continue based functionality. For mono, it was pretty new. Right. We've been working to expand the set of edits that the .NET WebAssembly runtime can support, as well as the related mobile workloads that use a similar runtime setup. In .NET 7, that will get much richer. You'll be able to do a lot more types of edits that you can hot reload for like an MVC app. You'll be able to do more of those types of edits with a Blazor WebAssembly app. There's also like a nasty little limitation that if you happen to have both those things in the app at the same time, like let's say you have an MVC app, but it has a part of the app that is Blazor WebAssembly. The .NET marking site, like at .NET, is actually set up this way. Like most of the app is based off of Razor Pages and effectively MVC, but there's parts of the app that are based off of Blazor WebAssembly, like the live.NET page is all Blazor WebAssembly. In tooling, unfortunately today, that will downgrade your hot reload experience to the least common denominator of supported edits. So Blazor WebAssembly will be the obvious offender in that setup. And so you'll only, across the whole application, you'll only be able to do the types of edits that Blazor WebAssembly could support in .NET 6. We will do work in tooling. We're doing work in tooling to decouple those things so that for Blazor, you'll get the Blazor WebAssembly supported edits for that part of the app and the Core CLR supported edits for the Core CLR part of the app. So the total set of edits will increase, and you'll also be able to do the full set capabilities for each of the corresponding runtimes. Those are all things that we're doing in the .NET 7 wave, as well as tooling improvements that are coming in Visual Studio.
Man, lots of stuff. You guys have done a tremendous job, by the way, because so many people just anecdotally really excited about the latest things coming from developer division and the whole .NET platform. So way to go. Keep it up.
We do our best. I mean, it's tremendously helpful. All the the feedback and the contributions that we get from that ecosystem. Like everyone who has opened a GitHub issue or commented with their scenarios that they need that aren't working, that they need working. Everyone who sent us PRs. Everyone who's reviewed our docs. Thank you. That's your feedback and your participation is really what makes that possible. And we do our best to try and listen and to react accordingly.
Awesome. Fantastic. Well, thanks for coming back on the podcast and sharing with us what the latest and the future of Blazor. Appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me, Jeffrey.
And until next time, keep shipping.
You've been listening to the Azure DevOps Podcast, a show for developers and DevOps professionals shipping software using Microsoft technologies. Go to www.azuredevops.show for show notes and other episodes. On behalf of your host, Jeffrey Palermo, and our sponsors, thanks for listening, and may God bless you.